She taught kindergarten for 5 years, patient and gentle with every child, until gunshots echoed through the school hallways, and Miss Parker became someone she swore she'd never be again. Welcome to Secrets Never Told. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden identity and protective instinct, tell me in the comments from which city you're watching today. And if you believe stories about those who sacrifice everything to protect the innocent deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These are the stories that remind us heroes hide in the most unexpected places. The Sunshine Elementary kindergarten classroom buzzed with the controlled chaos of morning activities. 23 5-year-olds moved between learning stations with the practiced efficiency that only came from months of Miss Parker's patient guidance. Some worked with building blocks, others traced letters on worksheets, and a small group gathered around the reading corner where a volunteer parent read aloud from a picture book. Miss Sarah Parker moved through the organized mayhem with graceful purpose, her long blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that somehow still managed to look effortlessly elegant. Her blue eyes sparkled with genuine warmth as she knelt beside Tommy Martinez, who was struggling with his letter formation. "Remember what we practiced?" she said softly, guiding his small hand with hers. "The B starts at the top and goes down, then 2 bumps on the right side." Tommy beamed as his letter improved, and Sarah felt that familiar flutter of satisfaction that had drawn her to teaching. Nothing in her current life felt as pure as watching a child's face light up with understanding. "Miss Parker," called Emma, a precocious redhead who always finished her work first. "Can I help Marcus with his counting bears?" "That's very kind of you, Emma," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the perfect blend of encouragement and authority that made her one of the most respected teachers at Sunshine Elementary. "Remember to let him try first, then you can help if he asks." The morning routine continued seamlessly. Sarah had perfected this delicate balance over 5 years of teaching, firm enough to maintain order, gentle enough to nurture young spirits. Her classroom was a haven of safety and learning, decorated with bright colors, children's artwork, and motivational posters that declared things like, "You are amazing," and "Dream big." What her students, their parents, and her colleagues didn't know was that Sarah Parker had been dead for 6 years. The woman who stood before them, helping 5-year-olds tie their shoes and mediating playground disputes, had once been Lieutenant Sarah Chen of the U.S. Army Rangers. She had died officially in a classified operation in Afghanistan, her record sealed, her existence erased from all public databases. The Pentagon had even held a closed casket memorial service. But Sarah had survived that operation, barely. And when she'd finally made it home, broken in ways that couldn't be seen, she'd made a choice. She'd let Lieutenant Chen stay dead and become someone new. Someone who built things instead of destroying them. Someone who protected innocence instead of ending lives. The transformation hadn't been easy. It had taken 2 years of underground surgeries to change her appearance, months of studying education theory, and careful construction of a new identity. But Miss Parker had emerged from that process with one driving purpose: to spend her remaining years giving children the safety and stability that war had taught her to value above all else. "Circle time," Sarah announced, clapping her hands in the rhythm that signaled gathering time. The children responded immediately, abandoning their activities and settling cross-legged on the colorful carpet. After 5 years, they trusted her completely. As the children settled, Sarah noticed Marcus rubbing his eyes. The 6-year-old had started kindergarten late due to some developmental delays, and the longer days still tired him out. "Are you feeling sleepy, sweetie?" Sarah asked, crouching beside him. Marcus nodded, leaning into her warmth. Sarah's heart squeezed with protective affection. This was why she'd chosen kindergarten specifically. These children were young enough to still believe the world was fundamentally safe, old enough to begin understanding how to navigate it. They deserved someone who would fight to preserve that innocence. "Let's do our morning song," Sarah suggested, settling into the small chair that looked comically tiny beneath her tall, athletic frame. "Who remembers what comes after 'The sun is shining bright, the day is full of light'?" chorused 23 young voices. As they sang, Sarah's eyes automatically swept the room, checking sight lines to the door, noting the position of the emergency phone, cataloging potential cover position. Old habits died hard, even after 6 years of forced retirement, especially in a school where the unthinkable had become a legitimate concern. She'd chosen this profession partly because it felt like the ultimate act of faith, believing that tomorrow would be peaceful enough for children to learn about colors and numbers instead of hiding under desks. Teaching kindergarten was her daily bet that the world could still be kind. The intercom crackled to life, interrupting their song. "Teachers, please check your email for an important announcement. Thank you." Sarah frowned slightly. Principal Morrison rarely interrupted class time for anything less than urgent, but she continued with circle time, leading the children through their discussion of today's weather and helping them count the days on their classroom calendar. 20 minutes later, later, during the children's snack time, Sarah quickly checked her phone. The email was brief and chilling. Faculty alert. Local police have informed us of a potential security threat in the area. All exterior doors have been locked as a precaution. Continue normal activities. More information to follow. Principal Morrison. Sarah's blood chilled, but her expression remained calm. She'd been trained for this possibility, though she'd prayed it would never come. Every teacher in America had. She glanced at her students, happily munching their goldfish crackers and apple slices, completely unaware that their safe little world might be under threat. "Miss Parker," called Lily, a tiny girl with pigtails. "Can I have more crackers?" "Of course, sweetheart," Sarah replied, her voice betraying nothing of her concern. She handed Lily the snack container while her mind began running threat assessments and escape protocols. The kindergarten wing was at the far end of the building, separated from the main entrance by a long hallway and the administrative offices. If someone had breached the front entrance, they'd have to pass through multiple checkpoints to reach her classroom. That was both good and bad. More time to prepare, but also fewer escape routes. Sarah's hand unconsciously moved to her desk drawer, where she kept emergency supplies that went far beyond the standard first aid kit. Hidden beneath teaching materials were items she'd hoped never to need again. Zip ties, a tactical flashlight, and a small but effective weapon disguised as a letter opener. "Miss Parker, are we going to play outside today?" asked Connor, an energetic boy who lived for recess. "We'll see how the weather looks later," Sarah replied automatically, though she was already calculating whether the playground's open space would offer safety or exposure if evacuation became necessary. The children finished their snacks and moved into free play time. Sarah used the relative calm to position herself where she could monitor both the hallway and her students. Through the small window in her classroom door, she could see other teachers in the hallway moving with slightly more urgency than usual, though they maintained professional facades. Her phone buzzed with a text from Janet Morrison, the principal. "Police say possible armed individual in vicinity. Not confirmed on campus. Stay vigilant, but don't alarm children." Sarah deleted the message immediately and continued supervising the block center, where 4 children were constructing an elaborate castle. But every nerve in her body was now alert, scanning for threats with the hypervigilance that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. "Miss Parker!" Emma's voice held excitement rather than fear. "Look what we built." Sarah smiled and admired their creation, but part of her mind was noting that the heavy wooden blocks could serve as projectiles if necessary, and that the block center was positioned near the emergency exit that led directly to the playground. The morning stretched on with agonizing normalcy. The children moved through their centers, oblivious to the tension their teacher carried like a physical weight. Sarah led them through reading groups and math activities, but her senses remained sharp, cataloging every sound from the hallway, every shadow that passed by the frosted glass of their door. At 10:47 a.m., everything changed. The fire alarm began its piercing wail, followed immediately by 3 sharp blasts, the code for lockdown. Not a drill. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. "Everyone come to the reading corner right now," she called, her voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "We're going to play a special quiet game." The children responded immediately to her tone, abandoning their activities and clustering around her. Sarah quickly moved to the window, closing the blinds while maintaining her facade of casual control. "We're going to pretend we're mice hiding from a cat," she explained, gathering them into the corner farthest from the door and windows. "The quietest mice will win a special prize." Emma raised her hand. "Miss Parker, why is the alarm?" "Shh," Sarah whispered, placing a gentle finger to her lip. "Remember, mice are very, very quiet." She could hear her colleagues in the hallway now, moving children to secure positions, their voices strained but controlled. The lockdown protocol was being executed perfectly, just as they'd practiced, but this wasn't a drill. Sarah positioned herself between her students and the door, her body language remaining relaxed and reassuring while every muscle tensed for action. In her peripheral vision, she could see Marcus starting to tear up, sensing the adult anxiety despite their efforts to hide it. "Marcus, come here, buddy," she whispered, gathering him into her arms. "You're the best mouse in the whole forest." As she comforted the frightened child, Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The alarm system was campus-wide, meaning the threat wasn't confined to her building, but the lockdown was real, which meant someone with a weapon was somewhere on school ground. Her phone vibrated against her leg. A text from her aide, who was in the main office. "Gunman in parking lot. SWAT en route. Stay locked down." Sarah's blood turned to ice, but her expression remained serene. She'd faced combat before, but never with 23 5-year-olds depending on her. These children weren't soldiers. They were innocents who still believed their teachers could keep them safe from anything. And maybe, for the first time in 6 years, Lieutenant Sarah Chen could prove that belief wasn't naive. The kindergarten classroom fell into an eerie quiet, broken only only by the soft breathing of 23 children huddled in their reading corner. Sarah kept her arms around Marcus while scanning her other students, all of whom had picked up on the gravity of the situation despite her attempts to make it seem like a game. Through the slight gap in the blinds, she could see police cars in the parking lot, their lights flashing silently. SWAT vehicles were arriving, officers in tactical gear taking positions. Whatever was happening was serious enough to warrant a full response. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the main office. Shooter entered building through south entrance, moving toward classrooms. Stay hidden. The south entrance was 2 hallways away from the kindergarten wing, but in a building this size, that wasn't much distance. Sarah's mind automatically calculated routes and timing. If someone was moving systematically through the school, they'd reach her hallway within minutes. "Miss Parker," whispered Lily, the tiny girl with pigtails. "I'm scared." "I know, sweetheart," Sarah replied softly, gathering Lily closer. "But you're safe here with me. Nothing is going to happen to any of you." As she spoke those words, Sarah made a silent promise that would cost her everything she'd built over the past 6 years. She would keep these children safe, even if it meant becoming the person she'd sworn never to be again. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Heavy, deliberate, wrong. Not the quick steps of teachers moving children to safety. Not the organized movement of law enforcement. Something else entirely. Sarah's body tensed as every instinct screamed danger. She needed to get these children out of here, but the standard evacuation routes led toward the sound of those footsteps. The playground exit was their best option, but it would require crossing open ground that would leave them exposed. The footsteps stopped directly outside her classroom door. Through the frosted glass, Sarah could see a dark silhouette. The figure was large, definitely male, and the profile suggested he was carrying something in his hands, something with the distinctive outline of a long gun. 23 children breathed quietly in the corner, trusting their teacher to keep them safe. Marcus had fallen asleep in her arms from stress and exhaustion. Emma watched Sarah's face with intelligent eyes that saw too much for a 5-year-old. The door handle turned slowly. Sarah had exactly 3 seconds to make a choice that would define the rest of her life. She could remain Miss Parker, the gentle kindergarten teacher, and hope that hiding would be enough. Or she could become Lieutenant Chen again and do whatever was necessary to protect her students. As the classroom door began to open, Sarah gently lifted Marcus and passed him to Emma. "Emma," she whispered urgently, "take everyone to the bathroom and lock the door. Don't come out until a police officer says your real name. Do you understand?" Emma nodded solemnly, gathering the other children with remarkable composure. As they moved quietly toward the small bathroom attached to their classroom, Sarah stood and walked toward the door. The man entering her classroom was tall and thin, dressed in dark clothing and carrying an AR-15 style rifle. His face was partially covered by a bandana, but his eyes were visible, cold, unfocused, filled with a kind of desperate rage that Sarah had seen before in combat zones. "Please," Sarah said, stepping directly into his line of sight and away from where her children had been hiding. "There's no one here but me." The gunman's attention focused on her completely. Good. That was exactly what she'd intended. "You're lying," he said, his voice shaking with adrenaline. "I heard children. They evacuated already," Sarah replied calmly, continuing to move away from the bathroom door. "It's just us now." Behind her, she could hear the soft sound of the bathroom door closing and the lock clicking into place. 23 5-year-olds were now sealed behind a reinforced door that would buy them time if this went badly. The gunman raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Sarah's chest. At this range, there would be no surviving a shot, but Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she did something that surprised them both. She stepped closer. "You don't want to do this," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd faced death before and wasn't impressed by it. "You came here angry, but these children haven't hurt anyone." "I haven't hurt anyone." "Everyone hurts someone," the gunman replied, but his voice carried less certainty now. "The world is full of pain, and someone has to pay." Sarah recognized the rhetoric, the kind of nihilistic worldview that drove people to commit unspeakable acts. She'd encountered it before in interrogations, in the final moments before decisive action became necessary. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't a soldier following orders. She was a teacher protecting her students. "You're right," Sarah said quietly, taking another step closer. "The world does have a lot of pain. I've seen more of it than most people. But you know what I've learned?" The gunman's finger tightened on the trigger, but he hesitated. "The only thing that stops pain from spreading is when someone chooses to absorb it instead of passing it on," Sarah continued. "These children in this school, they're not responsible for whatever hurt you. They're 5 years old. They still believe in fairy tales and think everyone is basically good." She was now close enough to act, but she held back. Sometimes words could accomplish what violence couldn't. "They still believe their teacher can protect them from monsters," Sarah added softly. "And today, I'm going to prove they're right." In the hallway outside, the sounds of SWAT team movement were getting closer. The gunman heard it too, and his agitation increased. He was running out of time to accomplish whatever he'd come here to do. "Step back," he ordered, raising the rifle higher. Sarah didn't move. "No, I said step back." "And I said no." Sarah's voice carried absolute conviction. "You want to hurt children? You'll have to go through me first." The gunman's face twisted with frustration and rage. He'd expected fear, pleading, the normal responses that fed his sense of power. Instead, he'd encountered someone who simply refused to be intimidated. "You don't understand," he said desperately. "I have to do this. They have to know what it feels like." "I understand better than you think," Sarah replied. "I know what it's like to lose everything, to feel like the world has taken more from you than you can bear. I know what it's like to want to make someone else feel that pain." Her words hit him like a physical blow. For the first time since entering the classroom, the gunman's absolute certainty wavered. "But this isn't the way," Sarah continued. "These children haven't taken anything from you. They can't give you back what you've lost. All you'll do is create more people who feel exactly like you do right now." The SWAT team was in the hallway now. Sarah could hear their tactical communications, the careful coordination of trained professionals preparing to end this situation. The gunman heard it too. "It's over," Sarah said gently. "You can choose how this ends. You can be someone who walked away, or someone who hurt innocent children, but either way, it ends here." The gunman's hands shook as he held the rifle. His whole body trembled with indecision, rage, and something that might have been regret. "They took everything from me," he whispered. "I know," Sarah replied, "but taking everything from them won't give it back to you." For a long moment, the classroom was perfectly silent except for the sound of two people breathing and the distant tactical communications in the hallway. Then, slowly, the gunman lowered his weapon. "I don't know how to stop hurting," he said, his voice breaking. "That's okay," Sarah said softly, "but this isn't how you heal." The SWAT team breached the classroom door simultaneously with the gunman's surrender. In the space of 3 seconds, the situation went from standoff to resolution, with the gunman on the ground and his weapon secured. As the tactical team cleared the room, Sarah called out, "23 children secured in the bathroom, all safe." The bathroom door opened, and Emma peeked out cautiously. When she saw Sarah standing unharmed, she smiled with the resilience that made children remarkable. "Miss Parker," she called out, "we were really quiet mice." "You were perfect," Sarah replied, kneeling to embrace her students as they emerged from their hiding place. "You were all absolutely perfect." As the children were reunited with their parents in the school gymnasium, Sarah sat alone in the principal's office, answering questions from federal agents. The gunman was in custody, the school was secure, and 23 kindergartners would go home to their families that night. But Sarah Parker's carefully constructed life was over. "You handled that situation with remarkable skill," Agent Morrison observed, reviewing her statement. "Almost like you'd been trained for it." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I was trained for it. Every teacher is these days." "Not like that," Morrison replied. "The way you positioned yourself, the tactical awareness you displayed, the psychological approach you used with the subject, that's specialized training." Sarah didn't respond. "We're going to run a background check, Miss Parker. Standard procedure after an incident like this. I hope we don't find any surprises." Sarah nodded. "You'll find exactly what you're looking for." Because Sarah Parker had been meticulously constructed to withstand scrutiny, her background would check out perfectly, her credentials would be flawless, and her identity would appear completely legitimate. But Agent Morrison would keep digging, because men like him always did. And eventually, if he was thorough enough, he'd find the inconsistencies that would lead him to ask the right questions. The questions that would reveal that the kindergarten teacher who'd saved 23 children had been dead for 6 years. Later that evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at a framed photo of her students from the first day of school. 23 smiling faces, trusting and innocent, believing their teacher could keep them safe from anything. Today, she'd proved them right, but the cost would be everything she'd built since leaving her old life behind. The apartment felt different now. No longer the safe haven she'd created, but a temporary shelter about to be abandoned. On her kitchen table lay 23 handmade Christmas cards from her students, each one a testament to the life she'd have to leave behind. Marcus had drawn her as a superhero with a cape. If only he knew how close to the truth that was. Her phone rang. An unknown number. "Lieutenant Chen," said a voice she recognized. "Colonel Matthews, her former commanding officer. We need to talk." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she held the phone. 6 years of carefully constructed peace were about to crumble. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Facial recognition software flagged you during the news coverage. Your surgical alterations were impressive, but technology has improved. We've known your location for 3 months. Then why now?" now. Because today you proved you're still the soldier we need. The world has gotten more dangerous, Sarah. We need operators with your skills, your instincts. What you did today, saving those children while maintaining psychological control over an armed subject. That's exactly what we've been missing. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her two identities pulling her apart. I left that life behind for a reason, Colonel, and you built something beautiful. But some people are meant for more than beautiful, Sarah. You saved 23 lives today because you're still the warrior we trained you to be. Through her window, she could see the school in the distance, dark now, but still holding her heart. Somewhere in this town, 23 children were sleeping safely because their teacher had been willing to become a weapon again. I know, she replied quietly. I'll be ready, because some promises were worth any sacrifice. And 23 5-year-olds would grow up knowing that when monsters came for them, their teacher had stood in the way. That was enough. That would always be enough.